Good afternoon. This is Courtney Neubauer, and I have Babette Lanius, and we will be presenting today on updates regarding procurement, specifically supply chain issues, as well as some other areas regarding procurement. We also have two guests of honor with us today. So we have invited Mr. Richard Iverstein with the Office of State Procurement to join us today. And we have also invited Mr. David Radner to join us from the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry, or to answer any questions regarding commodities, and then also just contracts in general. So to get started, I'm going to turn it over to Babette and let her start presenting.
Good afternoon, everyone. The first topic for today's discussion is the memo that just came out concerning updates to the federal micro-purchase threshold. On November 17th, USDA issued a memo about the updates to the micro-purchase threshold, and it was updated in 2 CFR 200. So under micro-purchase distribution, the old language read, to the extent practicable, program operators must distribute micro-purchases equitably among qualified suppliers. The new language changes the word must to should. This language allows for those instances where there is only one supplier in an area. And if you remember, micro-purchases can be awarded without conducting competition. The old language simply stated that micro-purchases may be awarded without soliciting competitive quotations if the state agency or the program operator considers the price to be reasonable. But the new language adds that the operator must base what price is reasonable on research, experience, purchase history, or other information, and they must maintain the documentation. The government-wide regulations were also updated to allow state agencies and program operators to establish micro-purchase thresholds that are higher than the federal threshold. However, it also states that the micro-purchase threshold that is used must be authorized or not prohibited under state, local, or tribal laws or regulations. However, our Louisiana revised statute 2212.1 states that prudent practice suggests that 3 written quotes be obtained for any SFA purchase of less than 10,000 but greater than 1,000. However, the law does not require it. But for purchases of 10,000 or more but less than 30,000, the SFA must obtain 3 quotes by telephone, fax, or email. So basically, the going higher than the $30,000 range is not allowable under state requirements, because all purchases of any material or supplies exceeding $30,000 to be paid out of public funds has to be advertised and let by contract to the lowest responsible bidder who bid according to the specifications as advertised. So what's really changed? Program operators should distribute micro-purchases equitably among qualified suppliers, but it is now not a requirement. Micro-purchase can be awarded without competition if the SFA considers the price to be reasonable, and the SFA has based that decision on research, experience, purchase history, and any other information needed. And the SFA must maintain documentation of how they determined the price to be reasonable. So let's move on. That's the end of what we have on the micro purchase. And let's talk some about supply chain issues. This has been a big topic of conversation and phone calls because most, if not all, of our SFAs are experiencing challenges in purchasing and receiving food through their normal channels. Specifically, some SFAs have experienced unanticipated cancellation of food and supply contracts, lack of availability of certain foods, unexpected substitution of foods, and of course, increased food and supply prices. As a result, some SFAs are voicing concerns about their ability to obtain the types, amounts, and variety of foods needed to serve reimbursable meals. Now, we talked ongoing about using emergency non-competitive procurement. Non-competitive procurement or emergency procurement is in 2 CFR 200 and provides SFAs with the flexibility to conduct emergency non-competitive procurement when an urgent need or emergency arises, such as the need to replace missing foods or paper goods with alternative sources of products quickly. It's a standing flexibility and doesn't require a waiver, even if the cost of the replacement products are higher. With the supply chain issues that we are experiencing now, the SFA can purchase the products they need basically wherever you can find it. You are not required to purchase the item you originally bid or stick to the price that was originally bid. You all have been trained so well to think that we have to procure everything, which under normal circumstances we do. But USDA and the state agency both understand the difficulties you are facing, and that most of your time these days is spent just trying to find substitutes for the items on your menu. So, what do we need to support the emergency procurement? You do not need approval from USDA or the state agency to use the non-competitive or emergency procurement. However, you do need to maintain documentation to support the use of it. This could be the proof of contract cancellation or proof that the contractor is not able to provide the food that you need to meet the meal pattern requirements. So you need to maintain a description of the items you're purchasing under emergency procurement, including the estimated quantity and the dollar amount of the procurement. As most of you know, Governor John Bel Edwards has suspended the Louisiana public bid law, allowing for emergency procurement of goods and services needed to respond to COVID. The governor has extended this proclamation numerous times, and it's been extended for a 28-day period each time. The latest extension is effective until Wednesday, December 22nd. And the state agency has absolutely no idea when this suspension will end, but we do hope that it is extended through the end of the crisis, which I'm sure it will be. So let's talk about the waivers. Flexible menu planning methods may be needed in school year 21-22, including the development of plans for incorporating product substitutions or alternate menu items when the supply chain issues arise. When a school is unable to safely provide a meal component due to supply chain issues that are related to COVID-19, or is unable to meet dietary specifications with the available products, there's an option to use the meal pattern flexibility. To participate under the meal pattern flexibility, the SFA can have the waiver released by the state agency and choose to participate by selecting the portion of the waiver that's needed. and by providing justification as to why the waiver is needed. Meeting the meal component requirements is not one of the flexibilities listed under the meal pattern waiver and should only be used in dire emergencies. If this happens, just make sure you have adequate written documentation to support your decision. USDA has also provided a waiver to state agencies that allows them to not take fiscal action when a school is unable to serve required meal components, as long as we have adequate justification. So let's look at how to go in and change a meal pattern waiver. You can find the waivers under the form section on the green sidebar, and then you open the waiver form. As you can see, this screenshot shows an SFA has opted out of the meal pattern flexibility waiver. But the SFA can contact us here at the state agency, have the waiver released so they can update the waiver and provide their justification. So when the waiver is released, the SFA can choose the flexibilities that they need based on the supply chain issues they are facing. Adequate justification is required. The available meal pattern waivers are that all grains must be whole grain rich. For preschoolers, at least one serving per day of grains must be whole grain rich. To offer a variety of vegetables from the vegetable subgroups. Now, even if you can't provide the subgroups, you need to provide the portion sizes. To offer a variety of fluid milk. So with this waiver, you would not have to offer at least 2 different fluid milk options. And this was added as a waiver mainly for meals in the classroom. Low-fat milk must be unflavored, and to plan menus and offer food components for specified age grade groups in the stated combinations. And then there is an area for other where you can add if you have another issue. Once completed, submit the waiver back to the state agency. So we're going to talk about some different ways that you can deal with supply chain issues. While we're having this discussion, if a light bulb goes off, then you can think of any idea that will help others deal with the supply chain issues. Please type it in the chat feature. After this part of the discussion, we'll share what others have come up with to deal with this crisis. We definitely have to think outside the box because the issues don't seem to be getting better, and there seems to be little hope that they're going to get better soon. So have you thought about contacting companies that you may not normally use? Look at some smaller companies. There also could be some specialty companies that might be able to help you. Remember, you can have multiple vendors. One vendor may be able to supply pizza for this meal, but not for the next time you have pizza. So you may be purchasing pizza from multiple vendors during the year. Emergency procurement can be used even if it's a one-time delivery. You will need to maintain your documentation that shows that your contracted vendor can't supply that pizza that you need. You also may want to consider planning a 2-week menu so that you're minimizing the products that you're having to search for. Plan menus that are substitution friendly. An example might be a turkey sub. If the turkey is being shorted on this delivery, could you get ham? And if ham is shorted, could you get barbecue beef? So making sure you pre-plan your substitutions and keeping the items in stock if possible in the event a product is not delivered can be helpful. And order as large quantities as you can store. Make sure you stay in constant communication with your vendors so you're aware of the shortages. I have heard that oftentimes the vendor is not even aware that the product is going to be shorted. Of course, you want to be flexible and courteous to your vendors. Give them as much lead time as possible. USDA is recommending giving vendors a lead time of 8 to 12 weeks. This is also where a 2-week menu can come in handy. You're limiting the products the vendor is having to provide. And USDA and the state agency are both aware that there are numerous K-12 items that are in short supply. And USDA has provided these waivers to assist you when you're unable to purchase those normal K-12 products. So I have a chicken tender dilemma. I have chicken tenders on my bid, and the vendor tells me they're going to be shorted. So I'm going to ask numerous questions of the vendor. Is there another chicken tender that will meet the requirements? If not, is there a chicken nugget or a chicken patty that will meet the meal pattern requirements? If not, are there any chicken tenders, nuggets, or patties available, even if they aren't CN labeled? And if not, well, we may be using pulled chicken or chicken drumsticks. Several of our SFA directors have reported that some of the vendors are canceling contracts or shorting the products. Now, part of this may be because your contractor price is much lower than the retail price. So there is more profit in selling to retail operations. At the beginning of this school year, an SFA was having difficulty getting bread from their contracted vendor. The independent dealer that delivered the bread stated he was not going to be able to deliver bread until the 3rd or 4th week of school because the company was not providing him the product. After discussion with the area manager, it was found that the product actually was available. It is possible that the independent dealer was giving priority to the retail operations because they don't have a contracted price. So you also may want to talk to your local grocery store manager. Is there items that they stock that you could use? Ask them if they can increase their orders of products you can use. Have you looked at Sam's and Costco and Walmart? Consider using online ordering, such as the Webstromp store or Amazon. There are a whole bunch of sites that you can use for online ordering. Of course, I didn't check out, but I was able to get 9,900 count cases of hinge trace in my cart online. What about checking with the day-old bread stores if you're having difficulty getting bread? Utilize the state contracts if possible. I know that US Foods is not wanting to be a secondary vendor for our child nutrition programs, but there are other state contracts that you could use, like milk or bread. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't be able to use the state contracts unless you had all the required documentation from the original solicitation. But under emergency procurement, you are not required to maintain that documentation. Have you considered contacting the manufacturers to see if they will drop ship products to you? If you can't meet the minimum for delivery, consider partnering with some other SFAs to meet the minimum requirements for delivery. Connect with your brokers. They may be able to assist by contacting the manufacturers for direct shipments. Talk to meat packers in your area to see if they can provide meat products for you. In preparing for this training, the state agency contacted multiple meat packers and wholesalers in North Louisiana, Central Louisiana, and Southern Louisiana to make sure that this was a viable option. There were several who were more than willing to assist. Some stated they don't deliver, and the product would have to be picked up, but others did deliver. They wouldn't deliver to individual schools, but would deliver to a central warehouse. USDA has been promoting the use of fresh fruits and vegetables if canned are not available. There does not seem to be as many supply chain issues with fresh produce. Of course, using fresh produce is more labor intensive, and labor is also in short supply. What about contacting your local Subway or Domino's or any other retail operations? Just think about the vendors that you see at SNA and ask them, in the event I have a real emergency, would I be able to call you and get either a sub sandwich or a pizza for the students in the school? We know that paper supplies have been a huge issue. To-go containers, gloves. Let your principals know the issues that you're having and see if you can persuade them to let students return to the cafeteria. There are also different types of to-go trays that can be used. The clear plastic hinge trays can be used for cold meals. There's also black styrofoam trays and the retail style to-go trays. And if you're at a pinch, you could even use a nacho tray. Of course, if you don't have a warehouse or central storage, it's difficult to purchase en masse. Just remember that renting and purchase of storage facilities is an allowable expense. You can rent freezer and dry storage space from one of your distributors. You can purchase or rent rail cars or truck trailers for storage. There's self-storage facilities in even the smallest of towns. And you can rent or purchase freezer trucks or trailers. So let's look. Did we come up with any ideas while we were discussing? No ideas, huh? Okay. Just wanted to let you know that PRAC is also doing a presentation, a training on opportunities for school meals procurement and flexibilities during supply chain disruptions on Thursday, December the 2nd at 2 p.m. Central Time. And you can go to frac.org and there's a link there for registration.
Okay, we'll now move into discussing formal procurement. Before we select one of the methods, regulations include a requirement that a cost analysis be conducted. This is done so that we can determine which procurement method must be used and select the contract type that will result. This means every procurement estimated over $30,000 in value, including contract modifications, must include a cost estimate. Prior year cost records can be used to show the value of purchases for these products or services. USDA strongly recommends that the cost estimate be included in the solicitation. A statement can be included in the scope of services that in the prior year, the program spent X dollars for the goods and or services identified in the solicitation. When the value of the purchase is expected to exceed the $30,000 threshold, use one of the following. Either a competitive sealed bid, commonly called an invitation for bid or IFB, or a competitive proposal, commonly called a request for proposal or an RFP. So what is a competitive sealed bid or an IFB? So competitive sealed bidding procedures use an invitation for bid. These are publicly solicited and a firm fixed price contract is awarded. There may be one contract awarded to the most responsive and responsible bidder that has the lowest overall price, or Multiple awards may be made if the SFA states in the IFB that awards may be made to multiple bidders based on unit price by item or group of items. One would use an IFB when there is a complete set of specifications of products and services. There are two or more responsive bidders willing to respond, and a firm fixed price contract is awarded. We saw in the last slide, bids may be awarded based on a lump sum price to one bidder, a line item award based on the unit prices that is awarded to multiple bidders, or a combination award to multiple bidders based on items that are grouped. The key is that bids are awarded to the responsible bidder whose bid, conforming with all of the material terms and conditions of the invitation for bid, is the lowest in price. The sealed bid method, or IFB, is the preferred method when, one, a complete, adequate, and realistic specification or purchase description is available, and two or more responsible bidders are willing and able to compete effectively for the business. Now let's look at the competitive proposal, or the RFP. A competitive proposal uses an RFP, which describes how technical and cost factors will be considered in making the final determination for the purchase of goods and services. This results in the award of either a fixed price contract or a cost reimbursable contract. Competitive proposals are conducted with more than one source submitting an offer. It is generally used when conditions are not appropriate for the use of sealed bids. When using an RFP, proposals must be solicited from an adequate number of qualified sources, and the SFA must have a written method for conducting technical evaluations of the proposals received and for selecting recipients. The RFP includes the factors with which each proposal will be evaluated. So now let's talk about the provisions for formal contracts. The Buy American provision found in 7 CFR Part 210.21D is required for both fixed priced and cost reimbursable contracts. The Buy American provision requires SFAs to purchase domestic commodity products. These products must be produced and processed in the U.S. using agricultural commodities that are produced in the U.S. In other words, SFAs are required to purchase to the maximum extent possible domestic commodities or products. The credible food component is the agricultural commodity. As you know, there are 5 food components: meat and meat alternatives, vegetable, fruit, grain, and milk. Foods from Guam, American Samoa, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Northern Mariana Islands are considered domestic. One additional piece to note before moving to the award process is the geographic preference found in 7 CFR Part 210. Geographic preference is an additional scoring or evaluation criteria that may be used to provide a preference for the purchase of locally raised agricultural products. In accordance with 7 CFR 210.21G, a school food authority participating in the child nutrition programs may apply a geographic preference when procuring unprocessed, locally grown, or locally raised agricultural products. When utilizing the geographic preference to procure the products, The school food authority making the purchase has the discretion to determine the local area to which the geographic preference option will be applied. 2 CFR 200 doesn't allow geographic preference in the evaluation of bids or proposals, except for unprocessed, local grown, or locally raised agricultural products. There's also no definition of local. The SFA determines what will be considered local. This provision only applies to those agricultural products that retain their inherent character. 7 CFR 210.21 provides specifics as to food handling and preservation techniques that do not change the character of a product. Some examples are cooling, freezing, peeling, slicing, dicing, washing, packaging, butchering, cleaning, and pasteurization of milk. Flavoring of milk is not included, so geographic preference cannot be used when awarding a bid for flavored milk. We'll now move to writing product specifications. Writing product specifications is both time-consuming and involved. Writing detailed specifications allows vendors to bid on like products and allows the SFA to receive the product they desire. Refer to the training posted on the Pennington website if you need assistance on writing bid specifications. Revised Statute 2212.1 requires that all public schools post their bid to an electronic bid platform. Any special condition or requirement for the submission must be specified in the advertisement for bid. When using a fixed price contract, the bids are received, sealed, and held until the date and time of the bid opening. The bids are open during the public bid opening and are read aloud to all participants. A firm fixed price contract award is made in writing to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Where specified in bid documents, factors such as discounts, transportation costs, and life cycle costs must be considered in determining which bid is the lowest. Payment discounts will only be used to determine the low bid when prior experience indicates that such discounts are usually taken advantage of. For competitive proposals, or RFPs, you must first identify all evaluation factors and their weight, meaning how will each factor be scored and what specifically warrants one score from another. Evaluators must be knowledgeable in the areas being reviewed, as well as being knowledgeable in the scoring process. Again, the SFA must provide detailed, documented justification for scoring. The state agency or USDA should be able to review each of the bid documents and come up with the same score as the SFA. If that cannot be done, the SFA is not being specific enough with scoring criteria. Once evaluated, a contract may be awarded and the contract executed. This may be an official signing with the contract meeting that includes providing clarifications and expectations to the prospective vendor, as well as to answer the vendor's questions. Remember, contracts for food service management companies require prior approval by the state agency before executing the contract. The SFA may reject any and all bids for just cause, and this is in Revised Statute 382214B. Maintain documentation of repeated failure of the vendor despite repeated communication with the vendor. And do not send a bid request to a vendor that you do not consider to be a responsible and responsive vendor. Managing contracts is the real work. The work is not complete just because the solicitation, evaluation, and contract award has occurred. In accordance with 2 CFR Part 200.318B, the SFA must maintain oversight to ensure that contractors perform in accordance with the terms, conditions, and specifications of their contract. One of the first functions in managing the contract is determining that you have received the required certificates. The independent price determination certificate, the suspension and debarment certification form, and the lobbying certification form. Some examples of managing the contract is ensuring that the solicitation and contract match. The SFA should make sure that the description and price of the product and/or services match the item description and the price in the bid document. There should be written communication with the vendor when products are delivered that do not match the bid requirements. If the SFA contracts with a food service management company and participation in an advisory committee is required, is a representative from the FSMC participating, and are they following through with requests from the SFA, students, parents, and other stakeholders? Has the Buy American documentation been provided by the vendor, and is the SFA receiving the domestic products that they were bid by the vendor? Is the company requesting substitutions for items if U.S. products are not available? Is the company requesting substitutions of other products before sending them? And are they providing those products at the bid price? Notice this is a continual cycle. The cycle doesn't end until the contract ends. When managing processing contracts, the requirements include reconciliation of the amounts of USDA products sent to the processor and the amount of the product received by the SFA from the processor. The bid price must be correctly reflected on each delivery ticket or invoice. The SFA must continually monitor the processor's performance. Did you check the SAM.GOV website to be sure that the vendor has not been disbarred? The company must be active in SAM. The vendor should be notified by telephone and email anytime the vendor fails to deliver in accordance with the signed contract. The notification should include how the problems need to be corrected. The SFA must maintain records of the dates and information discussed. If the problem is not resolved, the SFA must give the vendor written notification of problem, indicating that immediate correction is expected and that failure to do so will be considered a breach of the contract and could result in the cancellation of the contract. If cancellation of the contract becomes necessary, the SFA will provide written notice of the proposed action to the vendor. Reasons for the proposed action will be included. Even if the contract is not canceled, the SFA may disqualify the vendor from future bidding due to poor performance. The state agency advises the SFA to include language in the bid document that includes the steps that will be taken when a vendor repeatedly fails to deliver according to the contract. A bidder disqualified for lack of responsibility must be notified in writing and given an opportunity for a hearing. If the SFA is rejecting a bid because of unresponsiveness, the bidder must be informed of why the bid was rejected. If the SFA plans to allow piggybacking, the original solicitation and contract must state that piggybacking is allowed. The original contract must indicate either how many other SFAs are allowed to piggyback or a dollar value that will be allowed. The piggybacking SFA must have all of the required documentation. And please refer to memo SFS 18-79 for all of that required documentation. State regulations allow SFAs to piggyback within 1 year of the opening of bids, provided that the following conditions are met. 1, that the contract was bid in compliance with revised statute 38-2211. The total purchases on the contract do not exceed 2 times what was purchased by the political subdivision bidding the contract. This could conflict with the material change provision, so the SFA must determine which is stricter. Remember that a material change means that the piggybacking agency's purchases cannot exceed the small purchase threshold. The piggybacking SFA must also do a cost price analysis before making the decision to piggyback off an existing contract to determine if the contract prices are reasonable. The SFA needs to ask the questions: could I obtain better pricing by bidding this myself? All formal bids must include these provisions from Appendix 2 of 2 CFR 200. The bid must include the administrative, contractual, or legal remedies the SFA plans to take if the vendor breaches the contract. It must include language concerning termination for cause and convenience. The sample procurement plan has some sample language that can be used. The equal employment opportunity provision must be included in the bid. And the Davis-Bacon Act is only applicable if the contract is for construction. Appendix 2 to 2 CFR 200 also requires the following provisions: contract work hours and safety standards, rights to inventions, Clean Air Act and Federal Water Pollution Control Act, debarment and suspension, and the Byrd Anti-Lobbying Amendment and Certificate. Appendix 2 to 2 CFR 200 also requires the following provisions: procurement of recovered materials, minority women's labor surplus, and the Buy American provision. The civil rights laws must be included in the procurement documents, and the vendor must comply with the civil rights laws. And the civil rights laws are the Civil Rights Act, the Education Amendment, the Rehabilitation Act, the Age Discrimination Act, American Disabilities Act, and the Civil Rights Compliance. The sample procurement plan for school year 22-23 has been posted to the Child Nutrition website. A checklist was added to assist the SFA director in ensuring that all USDA required provisions have been included in the procurement document. That concludes our procurement training for today. If either of our co-hosts, either Mr. David Ratner or Richard Iverstein, have anything to add, please unmute yourself and feel free to talk. Also, if any of our guests have any questions, please post those in the chat box and we'll be happy to answer those.
Hello, this is David. I would just like to remind everyone that even though we are having some issues with late trucks, that if you need help with fruits and vegetables, we do have some fruits and vegetables. All you have to do is contact me or Mac, and we will try to add some stuff to your orders to help you with your supply issues.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
And I'm also here with the state. If you have any questions about using state contracts, I am available and will be pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Richard, would you mind providing your telephone number just in case anybody wants to reach out to you?
Oh, no problem. My phone number is 342-5474.
I keep watching the chat box to see if we have any questions. Sometimes when there's no questions, I wonder if we cover too much information and everybody is overwhelmed, or if we just did a great job of explaining everything and nobody has any questions. You would think with 77 people, somebody has a question, or maybe a good idea of how they're surviving these supply chain issues. Okay, since we don't have any questions, that will conclude our training for today. I don't believe we have any more trainings this week, but next Tuesday is our monthly call. So our regular monthly call is next Tuesday, which is the first Tuesday of the month at 1 o'clock. So we hope to see all of you on that training. So thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day and a good first beginning of December. Thank you.